Hey guys, hoping all is well with everybody. In this video we're going to be continuing on with Chapter 2, Geology Terminology Review. And again, I'm not only going to show you the definitions from a geological standpoint, but I'm also going to use examples and try to make associations that help you better understand these concepts, okay? So let's look at our first definition. It's going to be sediments. Sediments is spelled Sediments, and they are defined as deposits of sand, mineral fragments. And organic material is usually left by wind or water. Now, one thing that we can kind of match this idea of sediments with is the idea of a sedimentary rock. Sedimentary rocks are made from organic matter on the floors of oceans and other bodies of water. So they're made of the tiny organic matter and minerals from the ocean floor. Okay, so our first definition is sediments, and these are small deposits of mineral fragments and other organic materials left by wind or water. Let's look at our next definition. Our next definition is fault. And it's spelled F-A-U-L-T, and it is a boundary between station rocks that may suddenly form during an earthquake. Suddenly form during an earthquake. So as you guys can imagine by this definition, this isn't like your best friend comes over to your house and breaks like a crazily expensive vase and you're like, oh my gosh, dude, this is all your fault. This is more of a geological boundary. So what we're basically looking at here is this idea that if we have part of the earth kind of set up like this, okay, this fault line is going to be right here. And again, it's going to be a boundary between the moving rock and the station rock, okay? And this fault line can suddenly appear during an earthquake, okay? But that's our second definition, fault, the boundary between station rocks and moving rocks that may suddenly form during an earthquake. One thing I want you to keep in mind is there's different kinds of faults, so in terms of earthquakes, so keep that in mind as we go forward as well. Okay, let's look at our next definition. Our next definition is a fold. And its definition is formed by bending or buckling of rocks under great force. forms by the bending. Forms of rocks bending by buckling under great force. Okay, so in the last video we talked about the two different kinds of folding processes. We talked about the anticline, which is when this folding process takes place and the rocks form an arch-like structure. And then we talked about the syncline, which is the trough shape bending or dip-like bending structure of the rock formations. Now think about this. When something is under great force, it has to move, okay? It's going to, unless it's put up against something that is going to make it immovable, it's going to have to go somewhere. So that's where this process by a great force is going to force these rocks into some kind of bending or arching motion. Okay? Alrighty, let's go to our next definition. Our next definition is Moho. That's capital M-O-H-O. And it is defined as a change in the density of rocks within the Earth and this change marks the lower boundary of the crust. Okay. Now, one thing that you could kind of associate with this is kind of a very special term, but one way we can think about it is that this change of density here. So density is defined mathematically as the amount of mass per unit volume. So we have density is equal to m over v. So we can think about Moho being the m of mass here, the change in density. So we can kind of equate Moho with the m in density. And this change in density is going to mark the change in the boundary of the crust, almost like the transition that we talked about. Okay? So when we think of Moho, think of the mass, or m, in the density formula. Okay? Alright, let's look at our next definition. Our next definition is a seismology, and that is spelled S-E-I-S-M-O-L-O-G-Y. And seismology is the study of earthquakes. Okay. So seismology is the study of earthquakes. Remember, in the past video when we were talking about volcanoes, we talked about a seismograph, which is the device that is used to measure the intensity of earthquakes. Okay? So seismology is the study of earthquakes. A person who studies earthquakes is a seismologist. Okay? Alright, let's look at our next word. Our next word is geology. And geology is the study of Earth. Now, there's one way that you can think of. When we say ology, it's the study of something. And geo is Earth. Okay? Alright, so we have the study of Earth, geology. Alright, let's look at the next definition. Our next definition is aftershocks. aftershocks is defined as smaller earthquakes or tremors that occur after the earthquake. And I'll introduce tremors in a second. Okay, so one thing that you can think about here is with aftershocks, smaller earthquakes or tremors that occur after the earthquake. An earthquake just doesn't stop. It's not just like it happens and then it's all over. There's going to be kind of like aftermath bits to it. So it's kind of like a thunderstorm if you think about it. So during a thunderstorm, you can have rain and lightning and thunder. It just doesn't stop like that. As the storm moves more and more away, you hear those little slightly decreasingly sounds of thunder. And it's kind of the same idea. So the aftershocks are those tremors or aftermaths of a larger, more intense earthquake. Okay? Alright, let's look at our last definition. So our last definition, as I mentioned in the previous definition, is tremors. And tremors are defined as weak earthquakes. So a tremor would be, if measured by a seismograph, relatively weak in terms of its intensity. So like on the Richter scale, so to speak, there wouldn't be much of an intensity reading from that scale. These are much weaker and lower impact earthquakes. Okay? But those are the definitions I wanted to introduce in the second part of our terminology review. I hope this video helped you guys out. If you guys have any questions regarding any of the terminology here, please don't hesitate to message me. I'd be more than happy to clarify anything that may have been found confusing. But I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you in the next video where we continue on with our terminology review. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great rest of your day. Take good care of yourselves. Thanks.